I am Jim Collison, and this is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on November 16th, 2022. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you're listening live and don't see the chat room, there's a link right above me to it. Take you there. We'd love your questions live during the program. Or if you have questions after the fact, you can always send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or right there on YouTube. It's over in the corner over there, so you never miss an episode. Dr. Jaclynn Robinson is our host today. She works as a Gallup Learning and Development Consultant here with me at Gallup and is the host of Season 1 and now Season 2 of the CliftonStrengths podcast. Jaclynn, welcome back.
Thank you. Hello.
We are super excited today. Talk a little bit about how to coach with the new CliftonStrengths for Leaders report. And,
Yes.
together we'll kind of work through. We have a series of these coming out, so this won't be the be all end all. It'll be pretty close to it, but let's do a quick reset. We've recently launched, as of November 1st, 2022, we've recently launched the CliftonStrengths for Leaders report, available on the store.gallup.com, available as a role-based report, but it fits in nicely with the CliftonStrengths for Managers and CliftonStrengths for Sales reports there. You and I have gotten some time talking about that, right, on the new CliftonStrengths podcast that is coming up. Jaclynn, when we think about the conversation of coaching around this report with leaders in particular, let's do kind of a quick reset on that and think about maybe these conversations we have as we're coaching, and let's just get everybody in that frame of mind.
I think that's a great idea. And that first conversation is really focused on establishing the relationship. So if it's a leader you're coaching for the first time, building that trust and rapport, getting some insights. Maybe you are one of those coaches that has a client intake form that they fill out prior, so you can get to know a little bit about them before you engage in that conversation. And then, of course, once they have their leadership report, helping them start to understand the strengths. What surprises you? What resonates with you? What did you expect to see potentially? What's here that you want to discuss a little bit more deeply with me? So really helping them name what those talents are. And then that third conversation is helping them start to understand and appreciate their strengths. Now that we know about your talent themes, how do you see them showing up in your leadership role? And then, of course, last but not least, once they are able to really understand and appreciate the talents, how do we want to apply them for you? So that is where we start to invest in those talents more fruitfully.
I think it's a good reminder, and we spent some time through our certification program, GGSC, talking about these kind of 4 conversations, 4 understandings, 4 things to think about as you're coaching. I thought it would have been a good one, especially on this one, to kind of reset with that and just think about it. We on season 2 of the CliftonStrengths podcast, we've been spending a little bit of time thinking about how this meshes with the CliftonStrengths for Sales and CliftonStrengths for Manager. You've been doing some homework on that as we look at that in each episode. As you think broad overall, and we think about how we could use those reports as well in this context, just give me some thoughts, just high level on this before we dive into some really practical things on this. What are your thoughts of blending, using those reports together?
I think it's so valuable because as leaders, they don't just focus on the culture and the mission of the organization, but they need to be thinking about, who do I need to influence and get behind me? Whether it's fellow leaders on their team, whether it's managers, whether it's employees, so that the messaging they're sending across is something everyone buys into. So the sales report is so fruitful in that regard. And then they also have a lot that they're managing on their plate. So what a great opportunity to lean into that manager report and start to think about how their talents can help them manage projects or people. So we talk a lot about theme dynamics, but in this case, we have theme report dynamics that we're focusing on in season 2.
Yeah, the reports are kind of laid out very, very similar, where we have how to be successful, some areas to look out for, some that might hinder us, some action items associated with those. As you think about those 3 areas, and as we've been going through this in the on the Clifton Strengths podcast side,
Mhm.
what do you find again, before we dive into some real practical pieces, what do you out of each one of those sections, what do you as we're digging into this, what are you finding
Mhm.
helpful in those?
I like that it has opportunities for them to stop and think. And if anyone's seen the sales report and manager report, there's this piece where we talk about application on one of the pages, and then it goes into r- some reflective thoughts for them to really consider, yeah, how do I apply this particular talent when I want others to remember me? Or how do I apply this particular talent when it comes to the great work I see performers on my team doing? So, dependent on the theme, what I love is we ask a couple of self reflective questions, and there's a box for them to take notes of how they can apply that theme in a way that's going to allow them to invest in it
Mm,
beyond just the list that we typically have, our bullet point and list of ways that you can continue to invest and act on the talent. I like that it's cerebral in a sense as
mhm.
well.
Yeah. Yeah, not too
Yeah.
much information is I mean, we're not talking
Mhm.
about,
It's not an
a novel.
overload.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, it's some very I know as I've been working through it, especially, for me in the action items, in of the 4 action items that are there, really kind of picking maybe one of those to think about
Yes.
during a week, right? What to spend some time on. I told you on the program, I'm gonna be spending some time in Maximizer, and
Yes.
it's probably my least I talk about it all the time, but it's probably my least understood
It's
from my
fascinating.
standpoint, and taking those 3 reports and synthesizing them together, and then
Yes.
displayed in the context of, for me, the practical application is, how do I lead this community? Right? How
That's
do
right.
I right? And it allows me that's maybe a preamble to these 5 we have 5 ways to use this report, in your coaching. But for me,
Mhm.
maybe that's the preamble is how am I gonna specifically thinking through the lens of this community, how do I
Mhm.
apply those action items from all 3 of those reports, particularly thinking about the leadership report because I have so much. What would you is anything else you'd encourage me if you were gonna coach me for a second thinking, okay, in with thinking about this community, my role, what I do here.
Mhm.
Any coaching you would give me on that as I'm going through that process?
Oh, that's good. Well, I love that you already had a scenario in mind of where you could apply the leadership report. And I'm
Mm,
glad you brought that up because there might be folks on the call or listening in that coach, and it's not just leaders, but everyone is leading something. They might be leading their
mhm,
family, they might be a leader in their community, outside of just an organization. So first and foremost, I'm glad that we already have that scenario in mind for you.
mhm,
But then also in relation to the community, I'd be really curious and coach you about how do you see these leadership talents showing up for you for the good? Where have you seen some successes based on Maximizer
mm,
in the coaching community? We've certainly seen it as you start to even place some of these channels on YouTube where it's categorized. It's really efficient.
mm,
So if you're from a different country, as an example, and we have these call to coaches in foreign languages, there's that channel full of that foreign language that people can go to.
mhm,
So just an example that automatically came to mind, but um, really helping you think about where are you seeing some benefits to maximize or some successes. And then as we're looking through your hindrances, where have you seen some of those potentially show up? And now let's talk about, okay, how do you want to regulate that?
mhm,
Um, and then I really appreciated what you said about selecting one action item because
mm,
I'm also a stickler on having folks read through the action items and selecting one or two that they feel they could, put into place in the here and now or have as a 6-month longer term goal versus trying to check the box on all of them all at once
ooh,
where it just
ooh.
becomes diluted.
I like that. That backs me off a little bit because the same thing I'm focusing on, Maximizer wants to get them like, I want to get them all
Mhm.
done. Get
Yeah.
through. How do I
I'm
get
going to
them
be
all done?
great at all of them.
Right now, right? And so
Yes.
it's even backing that down a little bit to be like, yeah, I'm
Yes.
gonna work on one of these a month or focus on it, put a sticky note up on my monitor, whatever I decide to
Yes.
do. I know for me, communication high, talking about them often is one of those things that works for me. How do I bring them into
Mhm.
different conversations? Because people give me great insight on that. Amy asked a
Mhm.
good question. I think it comes at a good time. Of course, we have a book, Strengths Based Leadership. It has a code in it that
Yes.
produces a strengths-based leadership report, focuses on the four needs of followers. That's not going anywhere. That's still content. That's still very valuable, very important. And because we produced a new leaders report doesn't mean
Yes.
that followers still don't have needs. They do. It's been a really, really common question in this. Like, does it replace it? No, no, no. We still have followers that need that. This is new additional content around leading, and the four needs of followers is still a very important,
Mhm.
very valid concept and should be addressed as well. For those who've purchased Strengths Based Leadership or the Clifton Strengths for Leaders report, now in the resources tab in the Strengths dashboard, you'll see all that report for all 34 that's in there. All
Mhm.
that material that had been in the Strengths Based Leadership is now moved to a single report for you to look at as we sunset those reports here towards the end of 2023. That resource is available for you. So don't
Mhm.
hear us say that this is a replacement. This is an add-on too. We still need to continue. And it's very important. The work we did in that book and the work we did around needs of followers, still very, very valid and very, very important. Jaclyn, would you add anything to that before we dive into some real practical tips?
I just appreciate that you also hammered home how much we're going to continue to lean into the four needs of followers and how we still coach on that really frequently with leaders and managers. And even in our season 2 that we're starting to work through, we've been infusing the 4 needs into some of those talents that we've been talking about as well. So,
Okay.
it will be here for good.
Per Perfect. Let's dive into we've got 5 we wanna look at kind of
Mhm.
5 ways to coach, with this.
Mhm.
And let's look and I think one we talk about a little bit, we've been talking about more in the last year or 2, but especially in a conjunction with a 360, right? This may be a
Mhm.
report that we could bring in, talk a little bit about how we could use this with a 360.
Yes. So if you are developing a senior leader, it's not uncommon that they might be taking Clifton Strengths. So you've got this leadership report, and they also have a 360 that they've taken through their company. So it's an opportune time to coach them through their Clifton Strengths report, help them name, claim, and aim what those talents are, and then incorporate the 360. So as they're looking at the positive verbatims that have come from folks in their organization, where are they seeing that connected to their talent themes? And then when it comes to, let's look at some of these barriers or opportunities that have been expressed by those that are in your organization. Where are you seeing some of those hindrances as a result of your talent themes? And I will share, the having used Clifton Strengths with 360s, when you coach on Clifton Strengths first and then you infuse the 360 into it, it makes a lot more sense to them and it's a lot more accepting. They can accept it without necessarily having their defenses up because they've already gone through the helps and hinders of their talent themes. And as they're reading open verbatims or they're seeing, some of those competencies scored as higher or lower, they're already starting to connect their dots in their mind. And then they're actually more ready to move towards action faster in terms of, okay, how do we continue to maximize what I'm doing great? How do we build on what I need the support with? So, really great use of the leadership report to integrate it with the 360.
How do we think we've got this board of directors
Mhm.
activity, right? Practically speaking, and there was some questions around using managers and leaders and things
Mhm.
overlap. Also, Dora talks a little bit about distinguishing between the two. Then we add in a 360 context.
Yep.
We may be both a leader and a manager in this
Yes.
setting, right? Can you talk a little bit as we distinguish between the two? I have an answer as well, but I
Yes.
want to hear from you. How do we distinguish between the two, you think?
Yes, I automatically had a visual in my mind too as we were talking. But as a leader, we might often just naturally be thinking of executives, C suite, those that are managing both the board, balancing the mission and purpose, creating that company culture. But they also have, uh, to your point, Jim, folks that they're managing. whether that is the senior VPs because they're executive VPs, or whether it's managers. Those managers or those senior VPs are still going to have the same expectations that that leader might be, putting forth on them. Go out, have these one-on-one conversations, develop your people, help create clarity on their goals and expectations. Make sure that they feel cared about, valued, and have the sense of belonging on the team. And so that's all great that managers are doing that with employees, but leaders also have to do that with managers. And so that's where the manager report can really support them too of, oh yeah, I do have to manage people. I do have to manage projects. So this can really help me get in the mindset of ways that I can do that even better. Leadership sales report, great for thinking about strategic impact, the influence that they have on the organization, the communication they have with their board of directors, if they have one, how to, create more effective and influential relationships
Mhm.
across the line, etc.
Yeah.
What would you say? What would you add to that,
Well,
Jim?
I've been saying this a lot. I sound a little bit like a broken record over the last couple weeks as we've rolled this out. It's hard to take someone someplace you've never been before, and so
Mm,
I'd encourage you as a coach, make sure you have your own leadership or your own leader report, your own manager report, so that you know there's so much crossover in it. There may be some time when you want to focus on the leadership or the leader or leadership aspect of it, and so it'd be appropriate there. It may be where it's time to look at the manager or it's time to look at both. You know,
mm-hmm.
I've been really hesitant to prescribe a single, like, this is when and this is when, because life just isn't that way at all. There's net
Yeah.
right, and they kind of blend, and so I think you know who you're coaching or who you're working with better than anybody, but
Mm-hmm.
you've gotta kind of have dug into those reports for yourself and know what's in there and how that helped you and how you can lead others. One of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why I'm excited about the series because 'cause I've been diving into all 3 of them as we've been spending some time
It's been
doing this.
fun.
Yeah, yeah, no, very, very valuable. So, don't be too prescriptive on that because there is this crossover, those circles cross over, right, at times,
Mm-hmm.
and don't get too hung up on the terminology of it. "Oh, no, you're managing that." Well, no, you're leading. Well, okay, what matters is the results, right? What matters is the success on that. What are you having? If you got a leader and you're using manager report and it's working, keep going with it. So I
Mm-hmm.
just think to your point, this 360 is a great opportunity, depending to bring one, two, or all three of those reports in for the individual and have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of great information to help coach them with in that setting
Yeah.
and add that to the feedback that they're getting from those that maybe they manage and then those above them that are managing them in those roles. I don't know. Any other thoughts on that?
Yes. That's a good call because with a lot of those 360s, they'll have competencies listed, and there might be one competency that's related to just their ability to build relationships and manage
Mhm.
people. That
Mhm.
manager report might be most fundamental there. There might be other aspects where it's about, you know, um, their own VPs reporting back on how well they share a vision or communicate across a vision. Maybe the leadership report's going to be better.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. So I
Good.
like that we can really just kind of play around with them,
Yeah, yeah,
all 3
it's not a
reports.
perfect system, right? In that in use the tool and, sometimes I use a crescent wrench to put a nail in. So just
Mhm.
that's I shouldn't do that. That's a bad use of that tool. Okay, so we talked about for an individual in a 360 setting. What about teams of leaders? And I think this
Yes.
group gets forgotten
Yes.
about the most, right? We do
Yes.
this team building on teams. We sometimes do it at the executive level, but the middle managers, what about them? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Um, and this might speak to a lot of you all too. So whether it is your managers that are, let's say, well, still leaders. So let's say they're department leads or they're SVPs, even if they're executive vice presidents. They often do get overlooked because a lot of times they're just, you know, pushing down and encouraging policies, but they might not have that system in place where they can really start to understand and appreciate each other. So the leadership report could be a really good way for leaders to come together in a room with you, maybe a team workshop setting. How are we seeing our skills show up? Oh, I'm seeing some ways that I can use these to benefit you all as a group more. I can see that this is a watch out for. I've actually received that feedback for you. Now I have a name for where it's coming from. It's my relator. So this will allow leaders to be able to understand and appreciate each other better. And of course, you can also use this for, like I mentioned, they might not be executive vice presidents and senior vice presidents. It could be, or C-suite. It might be, your department leaders or division leaders that would be
Mhm.
doing this. But we know at Gallup, if they are all, and this is all something that you all have likely seen too, but once they're aligned and they're communicating and cross collaborating and they have this trust and rapport and friendship, then that trickles down and their teams are much more aligned, and work much better together.
Mm.
So that's another way that you could use this leadership report.
How important do you think pairing this with that "I bring, I need" exercise that we have sometimes with
Yes.
leadership teams? Again, we do this with oftentimes functional teams, but among
Yes.
leaders who may not be together all the time, but depend on each other for various roles in the organizations, pairing that together and then using the
Mhm.
report to say, hey, from a leadership perspective, I bring this, but in some of the other areas, I need these things. How important could
So
that be
fruitful.
taking it to that level, do you think?
That would be so fruitful. Um, I'm just thinking on that a little more, especially because what we're seeing a lot now, if there's global leaders, they're just spread in different countries. They might not be connecting as much, but their functions certainly talk to each other, so to
Mhm.
speak. They need each other in order to create a successful and productive company, but they might not have these opportunities where they come together and start to share out, bring,
Mhm.
and need.
Yeah.
So I think it's just so important.
Yeah,
Oh gosh.
go ahead.
Yeah. It also just made me think about, we're in the middle of engagement season, folks. So a lot of folks are doing their employee engagement surveys. And one thing I always remind leadership when we're reporting out on, you know, really the lived experiences of what their employees might be going through, um, your managers are going to be more engaged, 39% more engaged if you are, but you don't really have anyone that's there to support you and give you these one-on-one conversations. So you really need to lean on each other for engagement and well-being. And this could be one of those ways
Yeah.
of building those relationships.
I might even recommend coaching through having teams or having leaders on teams doing one-on-one quick connects, and doing that I bring, I
Yes.
need conversation is just part of the first
I
10
like
minutes
that.
of that. Prepare them for it to be super easy based on your
Mhm.
report. What do you bring in to this team, to this leadership team? What
Mhm.
do you need out of this team? And then have that conversation of how they could partner together to be able to do those, right? It's a 15-minute
Yes.
conversation that you could get teams doing on their own, and
Mhm.
in a great way to coach them. Connie said, Jim, is that to imply that leadership teams are dysfunctional? I wouldn't say that in that word, but we know they're very disengaged. Like those management teams are the least engaged out of a lot of the data that we get uh, uh, with our engagement data, and so we just know
Mhm.
they're struggling, and I think there's a way to help them dig out. They feel
Mhm.
alone. They feel on an island. They feel like they're
Yeah.
getting hammered from both sides. And I think as a coach, if you want to make a difference in an organization, that's the best place to start. I'm just going to say it. I
Mhm.
think it's a certainly we need executive buy-in, right? All those other things about building a strengths-based organization. Okay, number three, let's talk about, and I love this idea when we think about leadership development, right? How could
Yes.
we use this to take younger leaders and make them better?
Oh, the word succession. Love the word succession. I don't know if we think about it enough sometimes, but this could be a great tool for succession planning. So, those high potential managers that leadership has their eyes on, could take the leadership report. And then most organizations have competencies or skills that are required as you move up, from individual contributor to manager to leader. So they could really be looking at the leadership report and thinking about the skills and or competencies required for leadership and start to cultivate those now, with their talents in mind, leaning into those with intention. And this could also happen. Sometimes succession planning isn't, so set in stone where that's what you're actually calling it out to these high potential managers. So in that regard, even the folks that are on learning and development teams, or in those talent selection teams that work internally with their folks, if you're running programs for folks to build their leadership development skills, again, this is one of those really effective ways that you could support their leadership development and help them start to gain awareness of how they're showing up. And then you could infuse those skills or competencies that they would need to move ahead to help them start to exercise that.
Mm. Yeah, I like the idea of building these competencies, right?
Mhm.
And then bringing the report in, bringing the content in, but more than just the content and the reports is the conversations that goes on around that, right? Then being
Mhm.
able to measure that growth, being able to measure
Yes.
that development in this. Am I making steps this way? Again, another one where both the manager and the leader report may be super beneficial in building these programs is growing
Yes.
future leadership, right?
Yes, exactly.
On the flip side of that, number 4, as we think about struggling leaders, as we think about those
Yeah.
who are who still have opportunity. Let's put it that way. They still have opportunity.
Opportunity.
How might we use
We're
that
gonna
in
maximize that.
right, how might we use that?
Yeah, so if there's some underperforming leaders, this could be a good way to continue to engage them in a way where we're maximizing what it is that we see they are doing well, and we're using the leadership report to help them see those areas of opportunity that they need to cultivate further. And I always think of using a report as a safer way because a lot of times they'll see the strengths that we're calling out, they'll see the hindrances that we're calling out. And oftentimes they've already heard about those barriers
Mhm.
or those hindrances. And so they can go, oh, I have heard that. Now I see where it's coming from. It makes sense. And so oftentimes they're already coming to that level of self awareness before you have to directly say, hey, this is a problem or this has been a problem. And then you can really just continue to guide that conversation and coach them up.
Don has I remember
Yeah.
watching Don Clifton in a video where he kind of alludes to the fact of someone bringing up something that somebody else is doing wrong,
Hmm.
and how we kind of think that might be new material for them, and he kind of says they already know, right?
Yeah.
They already know.
Most have that self awareness.
You're just bringing it to their attention. I mean, you're just
Yes.
embarrassing yourself in the process of doing that. But I think, there's a great opportunity in this to help lead to those conversations, to
Hmm.
uncover that, to bring it out, right? To
Hmm.
most I think most folks know. I mean, I don't
Hmm.
we just need a framework, right? To kind of a safe place. We need to,
Yes.
we're using that term psychological safety in this, right?
Yes.
And way listen, psychological safety way more than just this conversation, but when we think about our own performance in that, being able to be in a safe spot to say to my manager, yeah, I'm not as great at that as
Yes.
I want to be. And there's really two ways. One, is it just I'm not taking advantage of the talent that I currently have to do it,
Hmm.
or am I not? Do I not have it? And should we find other ways to get that done,
Yes.
right? Because it could be
Yes.
one, it could be either or. In that case, I think sometimes we approach strengths as like, oh no, I already have it, and you're like, well, you have the potential,
Hmm. Has
right?
it been cultivated? Yes.
Yeah. Have you brought that out? Have you practiced it? This skill of
Yeah.
podcasting that I do, I mean, I go back and listen to some stuff from 10 years ago. I'm better, at least I hope. I'm better today than I was 10 years ago because of 10 million hours, 10,000 hours of practice, right? So
Yes.
I think a great opportunity to let the framework bring out those conversations about where you're struggling, right? Is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
Yes. Yes. And
I
sometimes they're just like we see from individual contributor to manager role, manager to leader, sometimes they're just not even aware of the way that they're showing up or the way they need to show up because they haven't been in that position before.
Mhm, mhm.
And so this can also support those underperforming leaders in a way where it doesn't feel like we're necessarily picking on them. This is an opportunity for development and growth.
Yeah. Yeah, no, right on. Number
Hmm.
5, and this is an area, a specialty area for you, and number 5 is we
Yes.
think about entrepreneurs. How could we use this in a setting or from a coaching perspective of
Hmm.
coaching entrepreneurs?
This is fun because some of you might be working with startups or you're coaching those entrepreneurs or solopreneurs. Um, and they still need to be thinking about their leadership style and the way they're showing up because you might have entrepreneurs or solopreneurs that need to get buy in and they need to be able to influence and communicate across the direction they want to go with investors. Or they might need to start hiring employees. And so they need to start taking more of an interest in investment in, okay, I'm going to be a leader, not just to myself now, but to others. So how do I want to show up? Um, and then another thing I was thinking about here is just to build connections or to hire contractors. How am I showing up as a leader? Because that's going to also impact who wants to work with me, whether it's a contract employee or someone that is just a mentor or an expert, etc. Do they trust me as a leader in the vision that I want to go with this company?
Mm.
So another different way that you could use this report for sure.
Yeah, what do you think the unique needs listen, the word entrepreneur can mean a lot of things. I think
Mhm.
sometimes we use it in the context of a startup, and so
Mhm.
small teams, lots of people trying to do multiple functions in a role. Small organizations have some of the same and similar pressures that large organizations do when you think
Mhm.
about payroll, when you think about HR functions, when you think about, right, all the things they have to do, development, not just of people, but of product, right? Um,
Mhm.
uh, what do you think in those kinds of settings uniquely as we think about entrepreneurs as leaders? Where do you think this gives the biggest bang for the buck for them?
Ooh, the entrepreneurs as
Yeah,
leaders.
as
I
leaders.
see
Yeah.
with that relationship piece, the
Mm,
work that
mm,
Gallup has done on entrepreneurs, we recognize that one of the key talents that these successful entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs have in building, growing, and sustaining a business is relationships. That's one of the 10 that we just see as a super theme across the board. And so, by thinking about the leadership report from the aspect of relationships that you just brought up, whether it's a small startup or a significant company, how are they going to have lasting relationships? What are the themes that they're using to create those lasting relationships? Especially as they take it one step further and start thinking about the relationship with the customers.
mhm,
What's the vision or the influence I'm creating for my team or my organization so that they recognize we want, I mean, oftentimes long term customer commitment and growth.
mhm,
And so, what are the themes I can use so that people can start to recognize in my organization or in my sphere of influence the value I place on relationships?
yeah. Yeah, you alluded to this. I like this. I think for leaders who are entrepreneurs, there's this vision of what the future could be. Right?
Mhm.
We spend a lot of time dreaming about getting to a spot of self-sustaining or
Mhm.
getting to a spot of success and what that strategic future l looks like, right? And so I think
Yes.
there's some opportunity, especially coaching on this, not just for the leaders, but coaching these leaders to be
Yes.
able to say, how do we use what you have to help us cast the vision, whether that's in an architect role, whether that's in a
Yes.
sales role, right? Whether that's in a implementation role. What are those roles that
Yes.
you fit? And then what are you missing? Or
Yes.
what could you be missing in there? So
Yes.
I like to think it that way. Anything else you'd add to that?
That's a great way of putting it. Even if you have those entrepreneurs, as I'm thinking, that want to sell off a business, if you're not exhibiting those trusted leadership skills, are they going to want to take a business that they don't know? They might not want to take a business that has kind of been run into the ground because there's no trust or rapport or vision. And so, circling back to your point, I think there's a lot of value no matter what type of entrepreneur you are, regardless of industry, team, etc.
Mhm.
It can be so
Mhm.
valuable to start thinking about, yeah, how am I sharing my vision? How am I building relationships, etc.
Yeah. I love it. 5 ways for you to look at this. We'll have more content for you around this, as I
Yes.
mentioned in future sessions. Jackie's joining us. Jeremy Petrosini is going to join us. Robert Gapsa is going to be on here and joining us talking about this, how to use this. So lots of great learning material coming up. A couple questions. Lauren asked, as a nonprofit
Ooh.
healthcare, right? We can only afford one. Which one do we recommend? Manager report or leader report for lower quartile? They just closed their engagement survey. I got a few thoughts, but Jaclyn, any thoughts on that
Mhm.
as we think about if you could pick one? And we've looked at all three of these,
Uh-huh. We
or the
have.
two in question here, right? Your thoughts on that?
Ooh, if you had to pick and choose, I think I'd be wondering what's the population that would be receiving the reports, because if it is more people manager, mid manager, the manager report probably is going to be most fruitful because it's going to help them think about how do I people manage, how do I project manage. Um, if it's managers or leaders and it's related to influencing um, the employees, building trust and rapport with the employees, helping to communicate across the larger message, because that's been lost and maybe employees don't know where are we heading in the future. The leadership report might be more helpful because it
Mhm.
can help, I think, guide the North Star and have everyone be a leader for this is where I want to move us. And so managers, they have to lead their teams and move them in the direction towards a North Star. So I think it kind of depends on the problem too, but hopefully I set that up where you can hear regardless of the problem it is, there's one that could be most beneficial.
Yeah, and listen, the importance in these reports is the conversations that go along with them.
Yep, that
Listen, there's
too.
great content, great material, right? That's available there. But Lauren, don't forget, like this is an exercise of not handing the reports and they're fixed, and you know this, right?
Mhm.
But really the conversations that go along with it. I think it's hard for us, not knowing the organization, not knowing the problems, to really make a good recommendation. Lauren,
Mhm.
you might think about starting as a pilot on this. So pick up for some managers, pick up a handful of the manager reports and do some coaching internally with that and see how you like it.
Mhm.
Do a B group, that'd be the A group. Do a B group, an A, no, do a B group. There we go. On Confused myself there for a second.
Ah,
On the leaders report, and do some
yeah.
coaching on that, and see how it works for the organization. You may uncover some unique needs that are in there, and
Mhm.
give you a good opportunity. Of course, it all starts with you in a lot of.
Mhm.
I would say you're the pilot, and see if you can get access to those reports for you, and then be able to kind of work through and say, yeah, here's kind of some of the information that's available in them, and how we could think about them ultimately, right? The I hate to put the responsibility on you, but coaches, it's on you. Like the vision you have, how you understand the organization, the coaching, the time you have available to work, those kinds of things. Reading the reports will certainly give a lift, but we want to give you some great ways to get in there and get coaching
Mhm.
with them. So little pilot, it seems like I hit a sweet spot on that one. Um, so great opportunity to give a pilot a try and see how that goes. Jaclyn, would you add anything to that? Oh, by the way, while we're kind of wrapping up here, but I'll take a few questions from the chat room if you have them. But any thoughts on any additional
Mhm.
thoughts on that, Jaclyn?
Yeah, I think what Lisa and Trish had said earlier, maybe it's up to the individual to decide which one they feel might be of
Mhm.
most value. But even Lauren, what you were sharing earlier, if you do have the opportunity to buy either or both, your idea of providing the leader report for the roll ups and the manager report for those that have direct reports is a great
Mhm.
way of just employing the report and working through it. But that conversation, as Jim said, as Lisa was saying, that's where they'll derive a lot of value. I don't think you could go wrong with either one. The leadership report, I think, is just framed in a way that's more high level, expansive, future focused. The manager report is framed in a way that helps you think about people managing, project managing, present moment. Oftentimes is the way I think about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, by all means, don't get too overwhelmed by all of it. You know what?
Yeah.
That's always the juxtaposition in this is we want to provide great resources for everybody, but then it's like there's too many resources, and so the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, and so take a step that direction, and let's kind of see where it goes. We of course
Mhm.
love your feedback on that. We've gotten so much great feedback on the manager report
Mhm.
that was out there, just people using that and using it well. We've even gotten some good feedback already on the leader report, and
I
so
love it.
yeah, no, just like to continue to hear, to hear from you on that. And like Holly says, never
Never
too many
too
resources, right?
many.
And
Individualize, individualize, individualize. That is the
w-
good thing about all these
it
resources.
just depends on your top five, right? You might
That's
love
right.
all of the options, you might not, right? And
Consistency might be like, "Give me some standardization. Let's go."
yeah, yeah,
No.
yeah, and George, we'll wrap it on this. George says, 34 report, sales report,
Yes.
manager report, leader report, BP10, which is still available out there. What a toolkit, right, to stimulate self-awareness,
Mhm.
conversation, implementation of all steps. And he is 100% right. It is all
Yes.
out there. Get familiar with that and make sure you're familiar with it for yourself as well. I have just found great benefit, and I'm learning a ton off of the time we're spending together recording the season 2 of the
Oh,
Clifton
it's so
Strengths
fun.
podcast, right?
Yes.
Just a great opportunity to dig in as that, and we're hoping a tool as we publish these here starting the 1st of January. I think it's going to be the 9th, but
Mhm.
early January 2023. Another tool you can give coaches or individuals, you can give those that you're working with to be able to
Mhm.
get a jump start on those themes, something to listen to. So pretty great. Jaclyn, anything else before I wrap it?
That's great. I think it's a good call out that the season is happening. So if any of you are curious about how you can start to use these reports in a theme report dynamic type of way,
Yeah.
we're calling those out. So we can help you synthesize how to use them if you have one person using all three or maybe just a couple of those. But we'll help synthesize how they can interact together and play together.
Lots of things happening here, and we'll ask you to stay close as we produce all this content for you. And the easiest way to do that is go to gallup.eventbrite, EVENTBRITE, eventbrite.com. Create an account, follow us. You get a notification whenever I publish anything new and a list of everything that's out there, including the December 20th mega episode.
Mega
You'll just, I
episode.
just like saying
To say it just
I
like
just like
that.
saying mega episode. With that, we'll
Me
remind
too.
everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we do have available out on Gallup Access. Head out to gallup.com/CliftonStrengths. Sign in with your account. Upper left-hand corner is menu. Choose resources and have fun. If you have input, we'll see you in a couple years. For
We'll see
coaching,
you in a couple years.
just come up for air every once in a while, right? For coaching, master coaching, or to become a Gallup certified strengths coach, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. You'll want to join us for the 2023 Gallup at Work Summit. I want to say Clifton Strengths. There'll be a lot of Clifton
I
Strengths
know.
there. Gallup at Work. I don't know how I said Gallup at Work like 1,000 times.
Uh,
Gallupatwork.com. Everything we know right now is posted there. So head out there. And we'd love to have you join us. Both virtual and in-person options available this year. We're excited to be able to provide both. And if you want to find us anywhere social, just search Clifton Strengths. We want to thank you for joining us
be there.
today and for hanging out. For those that are listening live, maybe a smidge of a post show. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.